It's 3 o'clock and we are starting our webinar session on transitioning to a faculty role. My name is Veronica Johnson and I am the, goodness, I forgot my role for just a minute. I apologize. I'm the communications specialist supporting the SREB Doctoral Scholars Program. And so I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Abraham and he will take it away and introduce our panelists.
Excellent. Thank you, Veronica. And scholars I trust, thank you all very much for being with us this afternoon for our third webinar series session. There will be a whole series of them. Is this going to be the last one for this year before we break and then pick it up back in the new year? Veronica, is that correct?
We might be able to squeeze one in December, but most definitely in January. And all the sessions are being recorded and they will be up on our website as well.
But it's so good to see all of you. I see lots of names in here that I haven't seen in a while and talked to. So, but welcome all you scholars to this webinar. The webinar this afternoon is transitioning to a faculty role and advice from our scholar alumni. As we were talking right before you all were let into the room, the program's been around a long time, almost 30 years, and we are, we've got quite a few of our scholars who have gone on to faculty positions and beyond and into administrative roles. So they've successfully made that transition from the role of faculty, the role of graduate students into the faculty and have had successful careers. So with us today, we have three of our graduates, and I will just introduce them very briefly here. We have Dr. Ramon Stewart. He is Provost and Vice President of Academic Affairs at Fort Valley State University, where he provides direction for the Office of Academic Affairs. We also have with us Dr. Bettina Wilkinson. She is Associate Professor and Associate Chair of Politics and International Affairs Department at Wake Forest University. And we have our third presenter today is Dr. Anise Yarber Allen. She is Dean of the College of Letters and Sciences at Columbus State University here in Georgia. I'd like to welcome all three of our presenters here today. Obviously, these folks are all accomplished, so they wouldn't be on this webinar and have been very, very successful in their careers. Because I could sit here and read off all the things they have done, but again, they have made it to the academy, and they've all had very, very successful careers. And so what we wanted them to do is be able to share with you all the experiences they had, the wisdom that they have from making that transition from faculty into from graduate student into faculty roles or into the academy. And I think they're in all different fields, and so they're going to have some different perspectives and different takes. So what I'm going to do is ask a question and give them a chance to weigh in, or ask questions, plural, and give them a chance to weigh in and provide some perspective on what their experiences have been like and advice that they would like to impart with you all. So let me pick on the only guy on the panel this afternoon. Dr. Stewart, let me ask you the first question. And obviously, I'm gonna pick the different panelists to first address the question, but we want the other panelists to weigh in on the same question as well. So, Dr. Stewart, what was the biggest lesson you learned in your transition from graduate student to faculty member? What was the biggest lesson you learned as you made that transition?
Well, good afternoon, Dr. Abraham, and good afternoon, fellow scholars. Certainly a privilege to be with you. I know how you feel. I was there back in 2012. As it relates to the transition, the most important thing is I would say to remember that the world is your oyster. You're a part of a very talented group of young men and women that honestly the academy needs you. And because of that fact, I think it's very important that you understand that options exist. Your first offer or your first inclination might not be your best one. And so I would encourage all of you to be patient, making sure that you not commit to doing something, but focus on doing the right thing. And then as long as you continue to be focused on doing the right thing, what you'll find is that transition, I believe, will be a natural one at a place where you can start to think about the academy, your department, your chosen, endeavors to be one of a family situation. Because as you get through graduate school, transitioning to your first faculty position, you're going to want to think about how this fits with your life, who you are, what you believe, and what contributions that you want to make to the academy. And it's going to be so essential that you have a level of comfort, be at a place where you believe that you can be nurtured, but more importantly, you can also shine. And so I think those are very important things that you really want to look at as you look at transitioning from your graduate program into the professoriate.
Thank you. Dr. Yarber, what your take on what was one of the biggest lessons you learned in transitioning from graduate student to faculty member?
I think one of I would like to echo Dr. Stewart and say thank you for having me here today and to welcome each of the scholars here. And I think one of the biggest lessons that I learned in my transition, I first would like to let everyone know I'm a 2004 doctoral scholars graduate. And when I graduated, I was also an empty nester. So I had a career prior to pursuing my PhD. And so being a graduate student, I was an adult graduate student. I mean, fully adult with, teenage children. And so my transition was a little bit different. I saw my transition as an opportunity for me to pursue another career. But there is a difference, I think, between graduate school and your first faculty position. So one of the things I was thinking about is that I think while being a graduate student, I think it's important. There's some valuable information in front of you that can help you in your transition. Maybe the organization of your unit, your department, understanding that structure, because that structure, if you're going into the academy, will look similar at your next institution. So right now you're in the grind, you're concerned about writing your dissertation and defending it, but there are other things that are going on. You have a graduate school, you have a graduate director, you have a department chair, you have faculty. All of these individuals are part of the department that you'll end up with. So like Dr. Stewart says, you want to find a place that's going to be home to you, but in that home, there is a structure. And so it was very important for me to understand what that structure was and how that particular structure could nourish me, that it could promote me to where I would like to be. And one of the trajectories I saw myself on was one of administration, higher education administration. So, aligning myself with those folks who could help me move in that direction. But I think it's critically important to understand that there is a structure and understanding how you fit inside of that structure. And then there's some other things I think we can talk about a little bit later about that structure that will be also meaningful.
All right, thank you. Dr. Wilkinson, you want to weigh in on that as well?
Sure.
On that transition?
Just like everyone else mentioned, thank you so much for having me. It is truly an honor and pleasure to be here. One of the main reasons why I would say, I am where I am is because of Dr. Abraham, Dr. Bob Bell, and Dr. Carrie Ann Rockmore. And I'll talk more about them later on, but I did want to send a shout out to all three because they were quite influential in my life. So the biggest lesson that I learned, I guess, building on the mention of the structure. and to also talk about specifics. I guess that's how I think. One big lesson was remembering that my time is the most valuable thing that I have. So therefore, organizing my time is incredibly important. I mean, I'm one of those type A people, Google Calendar, different colors, different goals, objectives. I mean, that's just how I work. And so I was told to do that by Carrie Ann Rockmore and by several people. So that's what I did. You know, what are my 10-year goals? What are my 5-year goals? What are my 1-year goals? What are my semester goals? All the way down to the day. Okay, what do I need to do to get there, right? Put it on the calendar, set up the tasks every day, every week, how to organize that so that my goals, so that my schedule matches my goals. So I can go more into that, but that's one thing that I found really helpful.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
Ansley, can I, Dr. Abraham, can I say something?
Absolutely.
Some of us, Dr. Bettina, are not so structured. We're a little free flowing.
Well, that's what, everybody's different, but at least for me, that works.
No, and I think the point.
I appreciate that.
You have to find out what works for you, and that's part of what's happening here. As all of you move through this process, you got to figure out what works for you and apply it in this setting. And it's going to be different things for all of you. All of you are going to bring your own likes and dislikes to the table, and how you work better in some places than in others. And I mean, all of that is being brought into play here. Well, Dr. Wilkinson, now to give you the pleasure to answering my next question. So as you move through, what does service mean in the context of being a faculty? What does that mean to you? And because we know that in higher ed that we're using that as one of the mechanisms in which to evaluate. So what does that mean to you, that service?
So I would say, this question has to be answered in the context of where one is or where one is going in terms of the job. And so for me, I wanted to have a clear understanding where I started in my position, how much service was going to matter in terms of my evaluation. And so I would encourage individuals to think about that, because we know overwhelmingly that women of color have overwhelmingly more service, are given more service, and then also felt like they have to take on more service than other individuals. So that's important. If your main job is requiring you to focus on research and teaching, then you should be focused primarily on research and teaching, and then leave, some time for service if, you are going to be evaluated on service. For me, the first few years at Wake Forest, we were not really expected to conduct service. So it's not that I want to look down upon service, but I viewed it as I have to survive. And so they're only 24 hours in a day, 7 days in a week. I did do a few things of service, when specifically it was an opportunity for me to get to know students, for me to get to know other faculty members outside of my department. But I was luckily very happy with the fact that my chair would say, look, you're not going to be evaluated greatly on service, so I'm not going to give you a whole bunch of service stuff. And feel free to use me as an excuse. Oh, my chair doesn't want me to do a lot of service, just so that you could focus on the things that really matter in terms of your promotion and tenure and review. So I would say that.
All right, thank you. Dr. Stewart, what about how do you see service in this context of being a faculty member?
Yeah, so Dr. Abraham, if you don't mind, let me put my provost and vice president for academic affairs hat on, because what happens is I'm the stop before the president in terms of reviewing people's promotion and tenure dossier. And with Dr. Wilkinson, I think you hit it right on the head. First of all, you need to determine what type of institution you're at and what the expectations are. Again, being at Wake Forest, one of the top Research One institutions in America, there's definitely probably that sense of publish or perish. And so you have to go through and determine whether or not you're at a teaching institution or a research focused institution. So I would encourage all of you to spend some time with iPads, College Navigator, to make sure you understand institutional types and get the type of institution that you best fit with. And then the other thing is, again, know how you will be evaluated. It's hard to win the game if you do not know the rules that govern the playing of it. And so whether it be a weighting, here at my institution, we're primarily teaching, although we do $24-25 million worth of sponsored research, and that's not bad with 116 full-time faculty members. But what happens is you need to know that in terms of teaching, service, and research, 70% of our evaluation is on teaching and service. Okay. And so you need to do those things and do them right. And the last thing I would want to say on service, try to find ways to kill multiple birds with one stone. And again, I mentioned in my other response, focus on doing not something, but the right thing. Try to avoid getting things just because they're looking for a body to serve. Serve on committees that also teaches you other aspects of a university and connects you in a way that not only are you serving, but you're also growing and getting a deeper understanding, and as much as possible, spread out through the university as quick as possible, as opposed to staying in your particular silo. I'll say that's going to be very critical for any of you that want to transition from the professoriate to administration.
Thank you very much. Good. Dr. Yarber Allen, you want to?
I think that my colleagues have certainly said almost everything that I would have said. I think the only thing that I would add is that, so I am a social worker by training. So my first career was in social work. Part of what we do is serve. And I do think that after you understand your organization, which is absolutely critically important, that to think of service as not only what you're going to get, as Dr. Stewart mentioned, that you'll receive from that, but you're also giving to the mission of that institution. And I think whether it's to your discipline, to your department, to the institution as a whole, you're providing some level of professional training, knowledge, skills, and abilities that you have that would be missing if you were not participating in that particular service activity. And I think that when we do that, all voices have an opportunity to be heard. And so I value service in the fact that as a faculty member, I knew that at least I was able to express myself, and I was not a faculty member who then complained later. That as long as I am serving and I'm giving and I'm making sure that what I believe and what I see is heard and it's in benefit to the students, to the faculty, and to the institution, then I felt good. Even if it didn't move forward, at least I had a voice. And I think it's important to make sure that your voice is heard. Although I think you need to make sure you do it, as my colleagues have said, understanding what your tenure and your promotion standards are and the mission of your institution.
Thank you all. Those were all very, very insightful answers to that. Dr. Yarber, let's stay with you. And if you would address this question for me, please. How did you identify or develop your personal professional development plan as a junior faculty member? So how did you identify or develop a personal your personal professional development plan as a junior faculty member? Now, I'm assuming that you had a plan, but.
Well, I did. And so, as I said, I was already an empty nester, had a career. So I kind of came into the academy with an idea, but I was a bit unsure. So I have to begin there. I was unsure, and I had to look at the structure. I had to get to know the faculty that I worked with. And so to develop my plan, the interesting thing is that my first institution, there was really no conversation about developing a plan. So I have to start there. So we all need to understand structure again. So there's not this idea of this plan, but I had one nevertheless. And to implement the plan that I wanted, I ended up learning how to connect with colleagues around campus who could help me get that plan instituted. And part of the plan includes getting tenured and promoted. And I think that one of the things that Dr. Bettina said that was very interesting is knowing what that looks like and then taking those steps to ensure that you meet that goal. And so my plan was also kind of driven by that, knowing what those promotion and tenure standards were, because I couldn't get to my next step without being tenured and promoted. So understanding that there's a step 1 and a step 2 within the academy. And I would like to double back and say another thing, because I think it relates to this professional development plan. I actually had a mentor similar to Dr. Bettina who said, listen, in your first 2 years, don't worry about service. We'll give you a couple of little lightweight things to focus on so that you can help meet this plan that you have. So it's nice to have a mentor who can help you with that. And finally, my dissertation committee was very helpful. So they understood the academy in a way that I did not. And even though I was not required to have a professional development plan, they helped me kind of shape the plan that I did have into some type of form that was doable.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Dr. Wilkinson, your take on a professional development plan.
Yeah, so when thinking about, the various different things that I'm required to do, research, teaching, and service, at least the first few years I tried to be, and even today, I mean, because it's one of those things, it's just a mindset that you take. And this was alluded to before, being strategic and being efficient with my time, and strategic specifically in terms of trying to do a few things that would check off more than one box. So for instance, research and teaching, one way to bring the two together, and this at least worked for me, is of course to teach the courses that I have to teach because I was hired to, to teach, let's say, research methods. That's what I teach. But then to teach classes on topics that are directly associated with my research, with that I need to teach, that I need to learn about, right? So if my next book is on the Latinx vote, then guess what Bettina's teaching next semester? The Latinx vote. So then I can teach myself all this stuff and then teach the students, and that will help me with my research projects. Even sometimes, we have some strong students, I would run some ideas by them and they would give me feedback, and sometimes it was quite helpful. And then also, if you can, one thing that I found really helpful is, and at least I didn't do this too much, and I'm glad I didn't, because it can take up some time, is to, again, combine research and teaching. If you can find ways to work with students on research projects. So at least for me, where I'm at, that is strongly encouraged. And so I found it helpful. I had some exceptional students the first few years, and I was like, oh my gosh, hey, I'd love to, work with you on a research project. And I had one student, just help me with writing a lit review. And I put her as a co-author on my first publication, actually. And boom, that was a teaching check and a research check on my end. And then I will say, with service, I was encouraged not to do very much. So, that's one thing that is just important to recognize. And then one thing that I was advised to do the first few years, at least, is to really not go crazy and just want to teach every single class that I, wanted to. But really, at least for me, I was told, don't teach more than 5 classes, like 5 new preps. So that's what I did. And that worked for me. So, after a while, American politics changes, every year, but there are certain theories and things that we can say, we can continue, building on a foundation with our lectures and our understanding. And so, yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate that much, very much. Dr. Stewart, let me get your take on that as well. Anything you want to add to that transitioning?
Well, you know, the craziest thing is going last after two dedicated scholars and everything. I mean, it's real hard to fill in anymore, but I guess I'll just try to take this and give a picture for the scholars. You know, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And while it may not be as cut and dry as some of us, you know, my background is engineering. I like to start with the end in mind. You know, I have a plan, I have contingency plans, so forth and so on. But you know, in the academy, we all get to the finish line in a variety of ways. I think what we do, you have that plan, you plan for success. You remember that the only time that success occurs before work is in the dictionary. And some of you will get that on your way home now. But when you have those plans, and to pick up on the question that Katrina Black Reed mentioned, those plans help you develop things like Dr. Wilkinson was mentioning, where she's teaching a class that she wants to write her next book on. She's working with graduate students or students, getting them to think through her research questions and stuff. She's serving on committees like strategic planning for the university or for the department. You're going through and looking at committees even down to homecoming, giving you a variety of perspectives where you're engaging with faculty, students, alumni. You start doing all of those things, and then it helps you develop where you are and where you want to go. And then within your department, as you're looking at building your research agenda or whatever, just remember, water always conforms to its container. Find a quality mentor, someone, and a quality mentor really is plural, because somebody will give you something that someone else may not have. Find some quality mentors, allow them to shape and mold your container, and then be willing to sit back and let them pour into you. Because the things that they pour into you, because they've already shaped and molded your container, it's going to put you on the path to success.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Ramon, let's just stick with you for the.
I'm glad I get to go first, okay?
There you go.
Going behind these other two is difficult.
It gets tough. Here's a question for you, Ramon. I should say Dr. Stewart. I should remain formal while we're doing this. What was your work-life balance like as a early career faculty member? And what advice would you provide for our other scholars about trying to maintain that work-life balance? Yeah, how would you advise these folk in becoming an early career faculty member and trying to maintain some kind of life?
So now I really wish I would have gone last on this, because I accidentally entered the professoriate at 24. Okay. And there's a whole different story about how or why I accidentally entered it. Okay. But with that, you know, I didn't have anything to do but my work, you know. And so, you know, I remember in my original days in the professoriate, I only had classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays because we were moving into the online space. And I had a journey where really I was able to work and hone my craft, focus on teaching and everything. But the majority of things that the scholars here at SREB already know, I had no clue of. Give you a prime example. I became a faculty senate chair my second year in the academy. Well, I had no clue that a junior faculty member probably shouldn't want to be a faculty senate chair because of the role that shared governance plays, the promotion and tenure process and everything. I just know that I was in the meeting and nobody else volunteered for it. And it just looked like all you had to do was say, is there a motion on the floor, and be able to carry out parliamentary procedure. So, mine was a little bit different. What I will say, though, that I coach new faculty members that I hire, and I'm just going to be very transparent. I tell people all the time, this university was here before you. It's here during you. And God willing, it's going to be here long after you go. Make sure that when you leave this university, you've done your best to leave an indelible mark on it, because you got to realize when you go, it's going to keep going on. All right. If you think the university is going to stop for you, you're probably in the wrong mindset. And so I say all of that to say, put your values together, make sure you understand who you are and whose you are, and then allow your profession to be highlighted or heightened, because you know who you are and you know the contributions you want, and you can grow and will flourish if you keep that focal point.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Yarber Allen, what about your advice in terms of work-life balance, and what would you say to these budding faculty members about maintaining that work-life balance? Wait, you're muted.
Yes, I have. I'm the only one in the suite right now, so I had to deal with a student really quickly. So I apologize. So I, much like Dr. Stewart, he came in at 24, and then quite honestly, I think Ramon, I might have been in the 44. So, part of what happened with me is I was an empty nester. So this idea of work-life balance, the world was mine. I could do whatever I wanted to, when I wanted to, how I wanted to, and I love teaching. So staying up for hours and working on a syllabus and working on course materials, it did not bother me in the least bit. But one of the things that I have noticed in this role, and especially during this time of a pandemic, that I think is relevant to move that transition from a graduate student to a faculty, and then finding that work-life balance. So what the pandemic has done for many of us is our life, our home life and our work life emerged in many ways. And, we in the University System of Georgia, we're not completely face-to-face. We're not all on campus. So some of my work is done at home. And so life is really, this work-life balance thing is real. And one of the things I have worked with faculty on is this: learning how to structure you and your time. Giving yourself boundaries is extremely important. To be able to say, this is my personal time. And that for me is Friday at 5 until maybe Sunday at around noon. And that's my time. I have to say I'm not going to answer an email unless the provost, of course, has something that she needs me to. If she texts me, it's on. But other than that, I don't really engage in work. I have to download, I have to let all of the things that are occurring in life, in my work life, I have to let it go. And I would suggest to anyone, if I had the one recommendation, it would be find the time for you, and then protect it with everything that you have in you to ensure that you take care of yourself. And you need to do that and be reasonable, right? So sometimes what happens in the academy, and I think Dr. Stewart kind of hinted to it, if you're only teaching Tuesday and Thursday, you can almost convince yourself that Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday are yours, and that's the time I'm going to protect. But you need that time to complete work. So you need to be reasonable in protecting your time. But when you've created that time, don't let people, as much as possible, don't let them infiltrate that. that time, including students, because now we're in the online environment, and students, if it's asynchronous, they think that they can have access to you 24/7. It only means that they have access to the material 24/7, not necessarily you. And so to be able to design your syllabus and your syllabi, excuse me, so that it's very clear, this is how you can contact me and when you can contact me. I think protecting self, your time, is critically important, and good time management is important. I'm not like Dr. Wilkinson, so I don't have yellow blue stickers. If I showed you my desk, you would go, oh my goodness, I can't believe it. It's very, very confusing. Yet, if you moved one thing, I would tell you, you moved my disorganized organization. You messed it all up. So that's what I would add.
Organized confusion.
Oh, no, it's not confusion.
Thank you. Dr. Wilkinson.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And with this, by the way, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to leave you all because I have to teach. They're waiting for me actually now, a little late. But anyway, yeah, so work-life balance. Oh my goodness. So I'll echo everything that was said just now. I don't want to repeat too much, but I will go into some of the specifics because I think they're worth mentioning. Remember to eat nutritious meals. Remember to exercise regularly. Remember to sleep at least 6 hours every night. One thing that was told to me that actually really hit home, and this is what was alluded to also earlier. Remember who will be at your funeral when you die, and think about those people. And, it's heartbreaking because I have colleagues who've gotten divorced, these last few years on the tenure track, who've lost family members, and they really regret how they acted in that. I mean, this is a wonderful profession, but this profession can break you also. And so it is essentially important, as was mentioned before, to remember what matters in life. You have one body, you have one, life. Make it the very best that you can. And, I know it's just like, whoa, damn lady, excuse me. But, I have to say it because I've seen so many people suffer through this. And so, like I mentioned, I'm a planner. So, and I married a guy who was very helpful and who actually cooks me dinner every night. And I appreciate that very much because we have 2 young kids. But we have a family schedule. We have alarms. We have, we're like, my husband hates me, but like, we'll wake up at 7, we have an alarm at 7:20, kids out the door, boom, boom, boom. I mean, that's how it works because that's how it has to work for us to both be working full time with young kids in a pandemic, working from home, it's just, it is how it is. And in a pandemic, more than anything, y'all, this is challenging, and I don't know what everybody's going through, but I think you just need to focus on the things that you have to do, and you just have to make sure that you do the very best that you can without losing the things that are the most important to you. Because again, one life, one world, one family. Try to multitask. One thing I also added, multitask as much as you can. Like I used to work out and with my kids, we would do random things just I can work out and spend time with my kids at the same time. Meal plan on Sunday nights. I mean, I don't know. There's so many things, right? But just try to work in a system that helps you be able to do what you can. And with that, I apologize, but I have to go.
Go to it.
Thank you all very much, Dr. A and SREB. Huge shout out to everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Hey, thanks, Bettina. We appreciate it very much.
Sure. Bye.
Dr. Abraham, can
Yes,
I add something to that conversation to one other thing? So I spoke about the life balance. And Dr. Stewart, please chime in on this if you have something to say about it. But another way in which I found to balance is if you can be part of the conversation about scheduling your courses. Mm-hmm. So if you are part of that conversation and you can get all of your courses on a Tuesday and a Thursday or a Monday and Wednesday and Friday, whatever suits you, and you can schedule it in hours that work best for you, I think that's helpful. I will tell you that for me, when I was at my former institution, I only taught on Mondays and Wednesdays because it was very difficult for me to shift my mind from, and that was probably because of I was an empty nester, but I couldn't shift my mind from teaching to research to service all in one day. So I chose to teach only on, it didn't matter whether it was Tuesday and Thursday, Monday, Wednesday, or Friday, it didn't matter. As long as that's all I did on that day. And then the next days, I could work on my service and I could work on my research. And I only saw my students on the days that I, pretty much the days that I taught. So every institution will be a little bit different about office hours. They'll be different about whether or not you can be engaged in the scheduling process. But if you can, then I think that that also will give you an opportunity to have a little bit more agency and your ability to take control of your life. Does that sound good, Dr. Stewart?
Yeah, I think it's spot on. The one thing though, I'd add a word of caution. There, you truly need that discipline. And it's almost like when we're talking about working from home and everything, they tell you, get up, get dressed like you're going into the office. Because you're coming out of your doctoral program. You remember the late nights and even later mornings when you were in your program. You remember what 5-hour energy drink and stuff could do for you. Well, now you're in a marathon, not a sprint. And so having a schedule that works for you, but then also not thinking just because you teach on Monday and Wednesday that you have Tuesday, Thursday,
Right.
Friday, Saturday, and Sunday to yourself. Commit to at least 8 hours a day honing your craft, because if you do not, one of the challenges with, and let me just be honest, a lot of my studying came at the last minute. One of the challenges with trying to get tenure at the last minute is you literally run out of time. You cannot do in 1 year what you should have done over the course of 6. So please do not put off till tomorrow what you should be doing today.
Thank you very much, and very much. Dr. Yarber Allen, how about this? So we've touched on this. Junior faculty always, or these early career faculty, talk about the difficulty in understanding exact requirements, because we touched on this earlier in our conversation, the exact requirements for the tenure process. What helped you understand the tenure and promotion process at your institution? What was it that helped you really understand the tenure promotion process at your institution when you first got started?
Yeah, I will be happy to share this, because I'm really curious at how Dr. Stewart will answer this, because when I accepted a tenure track position, I literally went in, and my dissertation folks said, listen, make sure you find out what is required. And I was told just get one publication, because it's a teaching institution. So you want one publication in 5 years. There was nothing, and I mean nothing, written at all. And it was just really kind of laissez-faire. However, during this period of time between the time I arrived and the time I went up for promotion, there was a lot of hoopla on campus, because people were being denied tenure and promotion because there weren't any standards. And so there was some concern about the lack of transparency and the lack of clarity in the tenure and promotion process. So by the time I applied for tenure and promotion, the standards were instituted, and we didn't go by the standards that they had when I arrived. It was the new standards.
Oh, no.
Yes. But this is where good mentorship occurs, because the person who I was mentoring who was mentoring me was in my department, was part of the process. They said, listen, they changed on you. This is what we need to do. And we began to run the race. And Dr. Stewart is absolutely correct. It's very difficult to get to that point, and then all of a sudden you're trying to meet the requirements. But I had a great mentor, and he worked with me to ensure. He had been there for 30 years. He knew publishers. He knew everything. He was like, listen, let's work on getting you a couple of articles. We even did an edited volume together to get me prepared, so that I was more than qualified when I went up for a promotion. And so I think it's really important for you to come in and understand the structure, the institution you're going to, and also the tenure and promotion standards. And if they're not clear, really try to work with someone to help gain clarity on what have people had who have been promoted. What did they have? What do you have? If it's not clear, but if it's real clear, it's no nonsense, which I like clarity and I like transparency. So I really encourage you when you first arrive to begin to have that conversation. And with me now, we send out tenure and promotion standards to new faculty. We let them know this is the requirement for you. So when you arrive, you can hit the ground running.
And I will just say, knowing some schools that do not do that still, I appreciate those schools that do and are very transparent on what those requirements are. And to all of you, you should, as you go out on that job market, you should try to make sure that those standards are in writing. It will help you a lot, because otherwise it as Dr. Yarber Allen put, things can change if they're not written. Sure. And sometimes they may change while they're written, and it may not help you very much, but it certainly can happen to you if those things aren't written. It's something to be cognizant of as you go through that the search process.
One quick comment on those two things. To piggyback, I think you all are spot on. What I would encourage each one of you to do immediately when you start looking at the institution, again, use College Navigator by iPads to figure out the institution type. The second thing you want to do is look at the institutional policies. And I would encourage each one of you to read the faculty handbook. The faculty handbook, if it's decently written, it will be that location that should start to talk about expectations. And if you understand the generalities of the expectations, because a lot of times you're not going to get anybody to say you need 3 publications or you need 2, because then there's a publication in this tier journal versus that tier journal or whatever. So they're not going to just tell you clearly you need 3, you need 2, you need 1. It's going to have some subjectivity to it in case this last factor, and this is the only thing that I think we need to add to this conversation. Remember that the promotion and tenure process is not just about what you do. It's also about the relationships that you have within your department and also throughout your college and potentially the university. There is a human interpersonal aspect related to the promotion and tenure process, so much so that one individual may have 2 publications and be seen favorable, while another person has 5 and be denied. And I don't mean to be morbid or whatever, but remember a couple years ago, there was this highly researched faculty member at the University of Alabama. She did not get tenure. And then remember, it was one of those public shootings because she could not understand that her interpersonal interactions had a lot to do with how people perceive whether or not they wanted to promote and or tenure her. So be careful with the personal interactions in your department, in your college, and beyond.
Excellent advice there. And Dr. Stewart, let me just stick with you right here, and I'm being very mindful of time here. Last question for the 2 of you. How did you seek out mentors or advisors at your institution as a young faculty member? How did you seek out a mentor?
Yeah. So first of all, I find people who are smarter than me and figure if I can just learn a little bit by osmosis that I'll be okay. And then I also find people who are or have been where I want to go. And then I say, show me how you got there. And that's usually, and the most important thing is I've always remembered why God has given me 2 ears and only 1 mouth, because when you find those people, be willing to listen twice as much as you speak.
Good piece of advice. Good piece of advice. Dr. Yarber Allen, your take.
I'm going to say, let the church say amen. That sounded good. And I don't mean to offend anyone, but that was, I think it was succinct and it was spot on. I mean,
Yes.
it's spot on.
Yep. Yep.
And there is, I think there is, I guess I will add this. There is something organic too about mentorship. There are times where you can meet someone and the relationship just occurs. It's organic. Accept that as well. Even if that person, you may be a tad bit smarter than them, you think in one regard, but they still have something that they can contribute to your professional growth and development.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank both of you. Veronica, do we want to tackle any questions? Because I'm being mindful of time. We've got about 10 minutes left. Are there any questions that were posed that we want to address, or a couple of them that we might want to address?
I do have a couple. One of the questions is whether or not service is important for postdocs.
And that's an interesting question.
Yeah, I think honestly, Dr. Wilkinson would probably be the absolute best to answer that, because she's at a Research One. What I personally would say to you is I do not think it would be that high, because the postdoc is not on a tenure track, but I would observe the person that you're studying with and working with. I would observe that, and to your point, Dr. Yarber or Allen, understand the culture, because while it might not be important at your postdoc level, if you're going to go deeper in the academy for promotion and tenure, it will have some aspect.
Dr. Yarber Allen, you want to weigh in on that a little bit?
No, I don't. I'm not in a Research One either, but I tend to agree with Dr. Stewart.
Okay.
Okay. And then I have somebody that says, I'm a 2nd-year postdoc who just received a tenure track job offer. Can you discuss the challenges associated with negotiating your salary, startup funds, and summer salary? And what is some language you use to make a counter offer?
Very interesting. Yeah.
I'm going to let Dr. Stewart start that one off, because you have two administrators.
That's right. So y'all want to be well versed in answering that question.
I'll tell you, I think this is a difficult question, especially given timing. The academy right now, in this era of COVID, budgets are shrinking. And different things, and to get an offer right now is going to be a big one. It's so hard with negotiating, because typically when we go out, we do not have as much discretionary funding or opportunities as you may think. And how you go and get a new junior faculty member and let them negotiate 10, 15, 20% higher than what you're offering them, I venture to tell you it's going to be very unlikely that you're successful in that negotiation. Now, what I am willing to do, though, for those who want to negotiate, because I can really give it to you from the administrative side, I'm more than willing to put my email address in the chat and my cell phone number and try to give you some one-on-one advice related to those negotiations. But right now, negotiations are going to be pretty challenging.
Dr. Yarber Allen,
that's why I gave it over to the provost. Because even when I started negotiating with faculty, ultimately it is the provost who's going to, kind of provide those guidelines. And so certainly budgets are tight, and I can tell you that, I'm in the midst of a negotiation, and this person wanted research funding. He wanted to set up a lab. He had, a lot of questions. And the answer was, we're in a budgetary crisis right now, and I'm not able to support what you're asking. So it's real, and under normal circumstances, I think at least I could have been able to do some negotiation, but at this moment in time, I can definitely tell you that it's, I think universities across the country are challenged.
If I may, one thing on there too, and I think you need to be careful with the negotiations, because right now there is a saturation of people with qualifications because institutions are downsizing and everything like that. So be careful not to price yourself out of a job. But I do think one thing that you may want to understand going in is, how do you advance your salary and how do you advance your research portfolio, so that is everything merit-based? Is there some type of incentive for getting promoted or getting tenured? Understanding what the compensation structure is of the organization or the institution, I think will be very, very critical, because while you may not get everything you want on the front end, again, remember, you're going in a pandemic where even at an institution my size with 2,832 students before I got on this call, we just cut $5.5 million. That's cutting personnel. Okay. And so be very, very careful what you're trying to do or how you're trying to do it during this pandemic.
And as I hear both of you, and I mean, I think it's a very fair thing to say to all of you on the webinar, is that you've got to be very cognizant of the environment you're going into, and be very, be careful that you just, I think Dr. Stewart, you pointed out, just be careful you don't price yourself out, because last year the market was this. Well, that's not the market this year. And I think and I am saying to all of you, you've got to be very cognizant of what is going. It's started, but it is not as bad as it's going to get. I'm telling all of you, it is going to get worse before it gets better, as the if you will, the budgetary process moves through the system. I mean, budgets are just going to be down because revenues are down, and that's a reality. So, I'm not telling you don't negotiate, but you may not want to hold to a position as strongly as you did a year ago, because you've got to be able to read this market that we're in right now, and read it well, because it's going to be a tough one for all of us, quite honestly, very tough.
And if I may add too, there's going to be a recovery period, right? So right now there's budget cuts, but even when the money starts flowing in, there's still, what's going to happen is we've got to recover. So there are some areas where we are going to be deficient in, that we're going to have to filter that money to, and it may not be in terms of salary increases. That's correct. And so we may be talking 3-4 years before we stabilize.
And that's a reality of how the markets move, and what happens when you get a downturn in the economy, like we've seen in this past year. Most of you all are too young or have not had the experience that. These folks that have been out there in the administration for a number of years, I mean, I've seen it. We saw it in 2008. And I mean, and it took a while to recover. But you just have to really understand these markets and realize that, where you start doesn't necessarily define everything that happens to you. There may be some things to be made up later on. I think Dr. Stewart was getting at that point. There may be some other things. And also, another way to think of that negotiation, think about other things that you might negotiate on. Is that, quote unquote, not necessarily money related. There may be other things to negotiate on: time, pieces of equipment, office. I mean, I don't know, but there are other things that you might be able to negotiate on make your tenure there at that school more palatable to you if if the salary wasn't where you wanted it to be. But there's some things just for you to think about and be very cognizant of as you go through that process.
And might I add, and I'll ask Dr. Stewart, so just so you guys will know that I accepted my position as a dean just in June of this year, so I'm a newbie at it. But I will ask this question because I believe it to be so just from what I've seen. Isn't it true, Dr. Stewart, that for the most part, universities aren't trying to lowball people either? They're typically offering whatever salary, it's pretty much a livable wage is what's, the market is requiring at that time. So it's not like you are going to be an engineer, and engineers typically get paid, Dr. Stewart, a little bit more than the rest of us. So they're not going to offer probably an engineer the same salary that they would someone who's teaching English, but that salary that they're offering that engineer is a fair salary. Am I correct?
Absolutely. And I think you're spot on. A couple things you got to look at in a higher education salary. Okay. First of all, let's say, for instance, I go out for that English faculty member and I pay him or her $60,000. Well, remember, I'm paying for a 9-month appointment where technically you're only teaching in a teaching institution, a 4-4 load, 15 or 12 hours a semester. Each semester, your summers are off. And here in the university system of Georgia, you can earn up to 33 1/3 of your base salary. So 33 1/3 of 60,000 is 21,000 and some. So that same person can make $81,000 in a year. That's again why you need to read the faculty handbook and everything. But you got to look at this. Let's say, for instance, I go out and I'm trying to hire somebody and I have $60,000. Let's say I have up to 10% more than that at my disposal. So that means I have $66,000. It does me no good to keep the $6,000 because $6,000 is not going to help me hire another full person. So to your point, Dr. Yarber Allen, it's to my benefit to go ahead and give you everything I got, literally and figuratively. Make sure that you understand that I'm there for you from the get-go. And then ideally, you and I build some type of allegiance that you're going to have my back too as we go through things like a pandemic or whatever, because you know that I tried to do right by you. But trying to hold the money back, most institutions, most publics, some of the R1s will have it, but remember, R1s are, a lot of them are 1862 land grant institutions. The federal government is soon going to have to cut. The other big source of their funding is state budget appropriations. Or to Dr. A's point, if you're not bringing in the tax revenue, you have to do like the state of Georgia and cut 10% from the base budget of all state organizations. Where institutions of higher education are in Georgia, 26 of them are state institutions. And so you have to understand the layout of the state. You have to understand funding opportunities. And you have to know that anybody that's bringing you in right now, they're probably giving you just about everything they have.
Yeah. Good point. Thank you all. Be mindful of time. We have run out of time here today. But thank you both, and I'll thank Dr. Wilkinson when I get to talk to her. But thank you all so much for joining us and being in it, being on this in this webinar, and to discuss and share with these scholars your experiences coming into the faculty, and as you have moved up into, both of you, into administrative roles. Veronica, is there anything else we need to, and I should thank all of you for joining us today on this. Yes, absolutely. Give you all a hand for taking the time. I hope you got some pointers and some things to think about when you get to these positions, when you're negotiating or when you're coming into the academy. Some of the things you need to keep in mind to make your experience in the academy a fulfilling one for yourselves.
The only thing
Doc-
I'll add is if you could please fill out the survey. If you're not able to get it from the chat, I'll email that out, and know that this is being recorded and it will be available on our website, hopefully by end of next week.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Goodbye.
So much.
Bye-bye.